y'all, I am Michelle Mazelleɣ. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to share with you all this short video clip and then I'm going to come back and talk about it. So let's get into it.
Hey, is it just me or anybody else getting inundated with people telling you we don't come from Africa? Look, let's make something clear. A public service announcement. I have been swabbed, tested from African ancestral DNA. Okay? I come from Africa, baby. Okay? I'm not indigenous to the Americas. Okay? I'm not a Native American Indian. I'm not any of that. I understand that all life migrated from Africa. Are we the Aboriginal people of the world? Yes. But baby, I come from Africa. Now I'm okay with your, I come from the Americas. I'm okay with that. That don't bother me. What that is none of my business. But please get out of my inbox, get out of my comments telling me we don't come from Africa. Because I come from Africa. My people are Igbo people, okay? Bantu, okay? I come from Africa. Leave me alone, because you're starting to sound like an agenda. You know, like the colonizers. Can you please stop telling me that America is Africa? So not only are you black Indians, you are now Africa don't even exist. Keep your agenda out of my inbox.
Hello, ma'am. I love your videos. I love your content. And I'm a follower of yours. However, this video concerns me. Because there is something that you do not know about who you are. And people just wave the word around Africa so loosely that you actually think you're from Africa. Well, let me just advise you. And a lot of us are not aware of this. Do not get your DNA done by 23andMe and Ancestry. Because what they're doing is they put your DNA into a database. They know who you are. They know you're not African. That is the word that has been given to us. We're not from those lands. Matter of fact, if you go do your history on Africa, the continent, United States is a lot older than Africa, the continent. Well, so let me just put you on some game. What concerns me is the fact that you said that your ancestry comes from Africa. They cannot date you back over to Africa and you ain't never been to Africa. So what you said is actually incorrect. So let me just advise you. Those landmasses were not here a certain amount of years ago. And there is no such thing as time, so we can't even put a time nor a date on it. However, Egypt is here. If you go back and do your research on who you are and not do it based on what you're being told, you'll understand that this landmass was here alone. And over time, other landmass became prevalent or they rised above the water. Now, not only that, ma'am, let me also make you aware is that the Nile River is over there by Tennessee and Mississippi. So what you're not aware of is that when they found out where these lands were, they enslaved our people from these lands and they shipped them to the 4 points of the world. See, that's where they got you. You wasn't taken from Africa. If you go do your research on Africa, they only have one slave port. If you do your research on America, we have multiple slave ports. So this is just me giving you some insight on actually what's going on. Like I stated before, this is no disrespect to you or your content. However, I do want to make you aware that you ain't never been to Africa.
The reason why I did this video is because I can't tell y'all how many comments that I get onto my YouTube channel about people, black people not being from Africa. Being everywhere but. They've been everywhere but. Like the first lady in the video, however a black person decides to identify as is their business. I don't really get into any of that. However, when you start trying to do like this second lady did and you start trying to just give out information with no evidence, no research, no facts, no nothing, that's where I have an issue. Because what I see happening now is literally the erasure of the African continent is what people are trying to do. Black people are trying to do that. Like, you can be Native Indian, you can be an Aborigine of the United States of America if you want to be that, but not at the expense of the African continent. You cannot erase a whole history. You can't erase a whole continent. It's not possible. It's not possible. You can't erase a whole group of people just because you don't want to be a part of them. If you want to be a part of Native Americans and Native Indians, then do so. But leave the African continent alone. Leave the people of Africa alone. Leave Black people who want to identify themselves as African Americans alone. And you go ahead and do you. Do you. But then you have people like this lady right here who starts spewing out this information that nobody knows where she's getting it from. And then she's, you know, the way she's speaking it, like she's telling the gospel. Like she's telling the gospel. And that's what I have an issue with. Trying to erase the African continent. Let's just touch on. I'm just going to touch on a little bit about what she said. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. First and foremost, I don't know where she got that Africa is younger than U.S. You know, Africa is called the motherland for a reason, because they are what's called the cradle of civilization. They are where civilization actually formed, and where, you know, they said the early human was found is in the African continent, why it's called the motherland. And there's something that called the human migration. When the environment started to change, humans started to migrate out because they needed to, of course, find more food. They needed to find, you know, warmer climate. There's a lot of different factors for the reason why they migrated. And so they migrated to these other areas. They migrated to Asia. They migrated to Europe. They migrated to North America. They migrated to these different areas. And that's the reason why you have people in these different areas. But the earliest humans started in Africa. Africa is the oldest continent in the world. Now, when we're talking about the independency of the countries, which would be later, much later, then yes, the countries in Africa, most of the countries in Africa are younger than the country of the U.S. But when we're talking about continents, that's a whole different situation here. Okay, so let's know the difference between a country and a continent. Now, the whole sea landmass thing, I'm assuming she's talking about Pangea, which is what it would be called, where everything was landmass. And of course, then it broke off into these various continents. Where that's fitting in, I don't know, but that's what that whole situation is. The problem that I see with people is that, you know, social media has become the knowledge. Nobody opens a book anymore. Nobody tries to look at no historical articles, primary sources, secondary sources, anything with accuracy. Social media has become the knowledge for a lot of people. And that's sad, because you're not able to really learn anything, because you're only learning from what somebody else is telling you, instead of you actually going and picking up a book and read. That's the problem. Not picking up a book and read. Now, the whole idea with Black people being the Aborigines of the United States, of them being the true Native Americans and Native Indians or whatever, kind of came from the They Came Before Columbus book by Ivan Van Sertima. Basically, he said that the Africans were there before Columbus got there. Now, we all know that the whole Columbus discovered America has already been debunked, you know, many years ago. Came to find that Columbus didn't discover anything. And so in this book called They Came Before Columbus, he talks about, Ivan Van Sertima talked about that there were Africans that were coming from African empires, and he said it believed to be the Mali Empire. And they came, they were exploring these various areas. They explored the Americas. A ship got wrecked. They got shipwrecked over in the Americas, and they pretty much intermingled with the natives. But in the book, he does specify that they were African people. So I don't really know why the people who are saying that they're Native Indians, why they want to erase the African aspect of it. But Africans have always been a part of history. Like when you're talking about Columbus, in this particular book here that I'm showing you, the people talked about Africa being very present in the exploration days, with Christopher Columbus, with the Portuguese, the Spaniards. The African presence was always there because they are attributed to a lot of civilization that happened in Europe. And so, the Africans, North Africa, West Africa, and Europe and America, they all knew about each other. So to sit there and act like Africa was just sitting over there doing absolutely nothing until the transatlantic slave trade is beyond me. They were very active in trade. They were very active with, being amongst these civilizations. They were very active. And they were doing their thing before, of course, people came and destroyed their culture and destroyed their empires. They were doing their thing. They were flourishing, which is the reason why they wanted to be all up in there anyway. But people just want to downgrade the African civilizations. They want to act like the African people didn't exist. I don't really know where they're going with all this foolery just for you to have an identity. Like if you got to erase the whole empire and erase the whole civilization for you to have an identity, something's wrong with that situation. You need to look further into the theories that you're believing. Now, I was reading a book called The Transatlantic, and I can't remember the title, so I will put up there. And it did say that Columbus did have a slave trade, or slave trade did happen before this transatlantic slave trade. That there was a slave trade that happened with Columbus. He actually was taking slaves from the Americas and shipping them to Europe. Now, they said it was little to no evidence that any of those slaves were being shipped to any other place but Europe. And then there's little to no evidence as far as how many people were actually being shipped. Like they can give an estimation. They said about 30,000. But again, it's an estimation. Now, in the book, when they described these people, they said that they were tall. They said that they had dark, long, dark hair that was curly. And they had greenish color eyes, the Americans that they were bringing over. I don't see that many black people with greenish colored eyes. There's some out there, but it's not the majority. And if it is the way she say it is, where are those people now in Europe and in Asia? When you go to some of these places, there's always a small group of African people or people with African descent. And once you start talking to them about their history, you will find out that they are indeed of African descent. They would say that their families migrated from somewhere in Africa. They didn't just say they just landed in Europe somewhere. There's a history, and the history always leads back to one other continent, and that's the African continent. When we're talking about the Native Americans and the Native Indians, also called Black Indians, and there's a book called Black Indians. They are talking about it was a mixture between Africans and Indians. That when they brought the Africans over, the Europeans forced that relationship. Native Americans actually did enslave some Africans. They intermingled together. They married each other. And of course, they had children. And it's the children of these descendants of those Africans and Native Americans that were trying to get money and were denied. I saw a documentary where, they gave, I think, $54 million to the Native Americans, the U.S. government did. And the freedmen was what the black people were called, or Black Indians were called, because that was that lineage name was freedmen, didn't get anything. And basically what they said was if they can't say they full-blooded, then they're not getting a dime. So you have, black people that are Black Indians that are still trying to get their money and haven't got anything because they refuse to acknowledge that they're Native Indians. So, y'all sitting around here talking about that y'all Aborigines of the United States of America, that y'all are Native Americans and Native Indians, and you haven't got a dime to show that. And the ones that are Native Americans and Native Indians say that you're not one. I mean, I don't know what to say. And when you hear some people talk, particularly this woman, it's almost like they also want to erase the Native Indians. Like they don't exist. Like black people was just the only people that were in the United States of America. So where were these Native Indians coming from? Where were they at? And are they non-existent? I mean, when you listen to them talk, it's almost as if nobody else existed but black people. And it's just like, okay, so where did all these other people come from? And if you are the native to the United States, to me, the makeup will be different. The way you look would be different. And the African continent is the only continent where there is a variety of different skin tones and a variety of different hair textures. When you go to some of these other continents, there's not a lot of diversity. I mean, let's just be real. You're going to know you in Sweden when you go to Sweden because most of the people look the same. You're going to know you're in Germany. Most of the people do kind of look the same. You're going to know you're in Japan, China. Most of the people still look the same. When you go to some of these countries in Africa, everybody looks different. Their skin tone looks different. Their hair looks different. Everything is different. And that's pretty much the makeup of black people in the U.S. There's the different skin tones, different hair textures, different everything. There's just a variety. And even in the Native American communities, because I actually knew some full-blooded Native Americans, and they pretty much looked the same way. They had the same type of hair. They had the same type of skin tone. Yeah, I'm just not seeing it. You know, when we're talking about genealogy and we're talking about, you know, body makeup, most black people's body makeup and the way they look is definitely of African descent. Even when you are historically looking at the identifications of Africans back then and what they look like, the description matches a lot of what black people in the U.S. look like. And what, you know, black people in the Caribbeans look like, and black people from all of the different parts of the world, what they look like. And that's because they have African descent somewhere going on in there. So, you know, some black people just trying to be anything but. They trying to be anything but African. And the one thing that the lady said was talking about it being a white supremacist kind of colonizer mindset. Nobody won't have nothing to do with the African continent, even some black people. They want to be anything but. I'm going to say it again. They want to be anything but from the African continent. And then they get on here and they try to spew all this false information because they have to in order for them to be able to justify who they are trying to identify as. If you have to go through that extent to what that lady did to try to downplay or erase a whole continent, a race, a whole group of people, just so that you can have an identity, that means that something's wrong with that. You shouldn't have to go through that extent to identify yourself of whoever you want to identify yourself as. Because if that's who you identify yourself as, that's who you identify yourself as. You don't have to erase anybody else in the process. But when you have to start doing all that means something's wrong with that. People need to start questioning that, because that is not factually based. It ain't evidence based. It ain't nothing based. It is just somebody that obviously has a strong hatred for the African continent. And in order for them not to have to worry about the people or the continent, then what do? You kind of dismiss it. You want to, you know, come up with these crazy theories, you know, about what it is and what it ain't, in order to justify who you are now trying to claim to be. And that will always be an issue. I am of African descent. And like I said in one of my past videos, I don't have to take a DNA ancestry to find that out. Okay. I do have the Ancestry website, where I was, like I said before in one of my past videos, I'm able to trace it all the way back to the slave on my mom's side. And that slave came from somewhere, and they shipped her from somewhere. And I don't think they're going to ship somebody in the Americas. When you say ship, that means they coming from water somewhere. Okay. And if she wasn't coming from water, they wouldn't have said shipped. She was shipped here from somewhere. So where was she shipped from? I'm going to assume that she was shipped from the African continent. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say on that. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that matter. I am Mazellegh. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.